title The Manipulative Mother-in-Law. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the small town of Alagoa. It was a peaceful place where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a steady pace. In this town lived Nena, a woman whose name was synonymous with strength, pride, and control. Her son, Chijioke, was the light of her life. She had raised him with all the love a mother could give, but underneath that love lay a deep-seated need to control every aspect of his life. It wasn't that Nena was unkind, far from it. She had a warmth to her that drew people in, a softness to her voice that made everyone feel like they mattered. She knew how to smile with sincerity, to offer the perfect word of encouragement, and to make you feel like you were the most important person in the room. But for those who had spent enough time around her, it was clear that her warmth was a shield. It was a shield that protected the iron grip she held over her son's life. Chijioke had always been her pride and joy. He had been raised in her image, respectful, dutiful, and a little too dependent on her. It was no surprise when Chijioke announced that he had met a woman he wanted to marry. Her name was Ifeoma, and she was everything Nena was not. Independent, bold, and utterly unafraid to speak her mind. To Nena, Ifeoma was a threat. A woman who dared to come into her carefully crafted world and take her son away. Ifeoma, on the other hand, had heard all the rumors. She had been warned about Nena, the woman who ran her son's life with an iron fist. But when she first met her, Nena seemed so warm, so kind, that Ifeoma wondered if the rumors were exaggerated. Surely no one could be as controlling as they said. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Ifeoma first visited Chijioke's family home. Nena had invited her over for a traditional dinner, a gesture that seemed innocent enough. Yet Ifeoma couldn't shake the sense of tension in the air. As she stepped into the house, Ifeoma was greeted by the familiar scent of simmering spices, the faint sound of a distant radio playing gospel music, and the soft chatter of family members. Nena stood at the door, her arms wide in a warm embrace. "Welcome, my dear. We're so glad you could join us," she said, her voice like honey. Ifeoma smiled, feeling a sense of unease she couldn't explain. "Thank you for having me, Nena. It's a pleasure to be here." Chijioke, ever the dutiful son, stood behind his mother with a proud smile. He had no idea that this dinner would mark the beginning of a war he was blind to. The evening passed in a blur of laughter, small talk, and polite conversation. Nena made sure to speak often, sharing stories of Chijioke's childhood, of the sacrifices she had made to raise him, and of how proud she was of the man he had become. Ifeoma listened politely, but each word felt like a subtle reminder that Nena had been the one to shape Chijioke into the man he was, and that she, Ifeoma, would have to prove herself worthy. As the night wore on, Nena leaned in closer, her eyes softening. "Chijioke has always been such a good boy," she said, her voice almost wistful. "He's the one I've always been able to rely on. I've always taken care of him, you know. It's just the way things are." Ifeoma felt a flicker of discomfort. She had heard about Nena's controlling nature, but this was the first time she had felt its weight. It wasn't overt, but the undertones were clear. Nena was setting the stage. She was marking her territory. "I'm sure Chijioke is a wonderful son," Ifeoma replied carefully, her smile stiff. "But now I'm here to be his wife. We're starting our own life together." Nena's smile didn't falter, but her eyes held a flicker of something else, something that made Ifeoma feel, for the first time, that she was standing in the middle of a battle she hadn't yet fully understood. After the dinner, as Ifeoma and Chijioke left, she felt the weight of the evening on her shoulders. It wasn't just a dinner, it had been a test, and Nena had passed it with flying colors. The days after that dinner left Ifeoma with an unease she couldn't shake off. At first it seemed trivial. The soft, calculated remarks Nena had made during dinner were just small comments. But as time went on, Ifeoma began to see them for what they truly were. Subtle. Manipulations designed to undermine her. Ifeoma was no stranger to family dynamics. She had grown up in a household where respect for one's elders was paramount. She knew how to navigate tricky relationships with grace, but something about Nena felt different. The older woman's presence lingered in every corner of their home, even when she wasn't physically there. It started with small things. One day Chijioke mentioned how his mother had offered some advice about their wedding plans. "You know, Nena thinks we should push the wedding date back a few months," he said casually as they sat on the couch one evening, scrolling through wedding magazines. Ifeoma paused, surprised. Why? We've already set everything in motion. Chijioke shrugged, seemingly indifferent. She just thinks we're rushing things. She said it's better to wait for the right moment. But it's not a big deal. We'll figure it out. Ifeoma felt a tightness in her chest. She had wanted a simple, intimate wedding. But Nena's interference seemed to be pushing them toward something grander, something more in line with her own expectations. Ifeoma knew that pushing the wedding date back wasn't just about timing. It was about Nena maintaining control over the situation. She didn't want to start a fight. Let's stick to the plan, Chijioke. We've talked about this. I agree, he said, his voice a little distant. But it wouldn't hurt to consider her opinion, right? Ifeoma forced a smile. Of course. But deep inside, she knew it was more than just an opinion. It was an attempt to plant seeds of doubt in their minds, to make Ifeoma second-guess her own judgment. The first thread of tension had been woven, and Nena was already pulling it tight. The following week, Ifeoma and Chijioke visited his family again. It was a regular Sunday, and Nena had invited them over for lunch. As soon as they arrived, Ifeoma felt the familiar warmth of Nena's greeting. She was always so inviting, so motherly. Yet, as the day went on, Ifeoma couldn't help but notice the small, calculated gestures that spoke volumes. Over lunch, Nena casually brought up how well she had taken care of Chijioke as a child. You know, I never let him go hungry, she said, her voice filled with pride. I made sure he was always well-fed, well-dressed, and had everything he needed. I was always there for him. Ifeoma smiled politely, but there was a slight sting in her chest. It was as if Nena was making a point to remind her that she had been the one to raise Chijioke, to shape him into the man he was. It was a silent assertion of control, a reminder that she was still the most important woman in Chijioke's life. Later, as they sat in the living room, Nena turned her attention to Ifeoma. So how are you settling in, my dear? Is everything all right at home? Ifeoma nodded, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice. Yes, everything's good. We're just adjusting to the new life together. Nena's eyes sparkled, a hint of something calculating behind her gaze. You know, when I first got married, I had a lot of responsibilities. It wasn't easy, but I always made sure my husband knew that I was the one who held things together. He could never forget that. The statement wasn't overtly hostile, but the underlying message was clear. Nena wasn't just talking about her past. She was reminding Ifeoma that in this marriage, Nena still saw herself as the central figure. Ifeoma tried to brush it off. I'm sure every marriage is different, Nena. Of course, Nena replied smoothly. But you must learn to be strong, to assert yourself. After all, your husband is your responsibility too. Ifeoma felt her stomach tighten. She had always been independent, always managed to carve out her own space. But Nena was making it clear that in this family, the space was already occupied. Later that evening, as Ifeoma and Chijioke returned home, Ifeoma was quiet. The words from dinner, the insinuations, and the subtle jabs all weighed heavily on her. She hadn't expected to feel so suffocated in her own marriage. But with every interaction, Nena was slowly eroding the foundation she and Chijioke had built. Is everything all right, Ifeoma? Chijioke asked, noticing her silence. I'm fine, she said, though her tone was distant. Are you sure? You've been quiet all night. Ifeoma sighed, running a hand through her hair. Chijioke, your mother, I don't know. She's always there, you know? She's always around, always reminding me of how much she's done for you. It's starting to feel like I don't know if I'm enough, like I'm always in the shadow of her expectations. Chijioke frowned. Ifeoma, you know she means well. She's just looking out for me. She's always been a big part of my life. I get that, Ifeoma said, her voice tight. But she needs to let us have space, Chijioke. I'm your wife now. I want to be a part of this family too, not just someone who's constantly compared. Chijioke sat down beside her, his brow furrowed in concern. I didn't realize you felt this way. I'll talk to her. I'll make sure she knows we need space. Ifeoma didn't feel reassured. I don't think it's enough just to talk to her. She'll never let go. She'll never really accept that we're building our own life. And I don't know how much more I can take. Chijioke didn't answer immediately. He sat there, lost in thought. The tension between his wife and mother was growing, and no matter how hard he tried to smooth things over, It was becoming impossible to ignore. He loved Ifeoma, but he had also been conditioned by his mother's influence his entire life. And now he found himself torn between two powerful women, each pulling him in a different direction. Over the next few weeks, the tension between Ifeoma and Nena grew palpable. Every interaction felt like a battle. And if Ifeoma didn't speak up, Nena would continue to manipulate the situation in her favor. Ifeoma couldn't keep her frustration bottled up any longer, but every time she tried to confront Chijioke about it, he brushed her concerns aside. "I'll talk to her, I promise," he kept saying. But it never seemed to make a difference. Ifeoma couldn't understand how Chijioke could be so blind to his mother's actions. She had tried to be patient, but every small dig, every underhanded comment, chipped away at her sense of peace. She didn't want to fight with Chijioke, but she was beginning to feel like she had no other choice. This chapter continues the slow, psychological buildup of Nena's manipulative tactics and the growing rift between Ifeoma and Chijioke. As Nena asserts her dominance, Ifeoma finds herself trapped in a delicate dance where every move seems to provoke another subtle manipulation from Nena, leaving her feeling increasingly isolated. It was another quiet evening, but the air between Ifeoma and Chijioke was anything but. The silence in the house felt heavier with every passing day. Chijioke, still unaware of the extent of his mother's influence, continued to fall into the same pattern of appeasement. He didn't see the underlying tension in his wife's face, nor the weariness that lingered in her eyes. Ifeoma had always been independent, but lately she felt herself withering under the weight of Nena's constant, invisible pressure. Nena had found new ways to assert herself. Whenever Chijioke mentioned a new project or decision, his mother's voice always seemed to creep in, offering unsolicited advice. "You know, I think you should really reconsider that. It's too risky," she'd say in her soothing voice. "A man should always have a secure foundation, and I've always known how to keep things in place for you." It wasn't advice, though it was a command wrapped in a smile. Chijioke would nod, grateful for his mother's wisdom, and Ifeoma would bite her tongue. The more Nena spoke, the more Ifeoma felt like a stranger in her own home. Her voice, her decisions, her desires, everything was drowned out by Nena's presence. It was one of those rare evenings when Ifeoma and Chijioke had some time alone. They were sitting in their living room, the soft hum of a fan the only sound between them. Ifeoma had been stewing over something Nena had said earlier that day. It wasn't just the advice about their wedding, plans, or her constant reminders of how well she had raised Chijioke. It was the way Nena had questioned Ifeoma's ability to manage their home. She had done it with such casual ease, as if it was nothing more than a conversation. But the implications were clear. "I can't keep doing this, Chijioke," Ifeoma finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Chijioke, who had been flipping through his phone, looked up in surprise. "What do you mean?" "I can't keep pretending like everything's fine. Every time I turn around, it's your mother. I'm drowning in her expectations, her opinions, her control. I can't breathe anymore, Chijioke." Chijioke felt his stomach drop. He hadn't realized how much his wife had been struggling. "I didn't know you felt like this. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "I didn't want to cause problems," Ifeoma replied, her voice tight with frustration. "But every time we take a step forward, she's right there, pulling us back. You don't see it, but I do." "I feel it every day?" Chijioke felt a pang of guilt. He had always been so used to his mother's presence, so accustomed to seeking her approval, that he hadn't noticed the strain it was putting on Ifeoma. But now, looking at her, the exhaustion in her eyes was unmistakable. "I'm sorry, Ifeoma." "I didn't know." Ifeoma's eyes were sharp as she looked at him. "You need to see it, Chijioke. You need to see her for what she really is. I can't keep competing with your mother for your attention, for your love. She's got her claws in you so deep I don't even know if you can see past her." The words stung, but they were true. Nena had always been the center of Chijioke's world, and he had never questioned it. But now, as he looked at his wife, his partner in life, he realized how much he had been blind to. That night, Chijioke lay awake, unable to shake off the weight of Ifeoma's words. He had always known his mother was overbearing, but he had never seen it through Ifeoma's eyes. His love for his mother had always been mixed with duty, respect, and an unconscious belief that he owed her everything. She had raised him, protected him, and guided him through life. But had she done so with the right intentions? As Chijioke turned over in bed, he heard the faintest sound, his phone vibrating on the nightstand. He reached for it, noticing the message was from his mother. Chijioke, don't let Ifeoma get too comfortable. Remember who your family really is. Don't forget the sacrifices I made for you. It was a message like so many others, a subtle reminder that his loyalty should lie with her, not his wife. A message that at first glance seemed like advice. But now Chijioke saw it for what it really was, a manipulation. His mother had always known how to weave guilt into love, how to make him feel indebted to her. His heart clenched as he realized just how deeply his mother had controlled him all these years. The next day, Chijioke tried to do what he should have done a long time ago. He called his mother. It was a difficult conversation, one that tested his ability to break free from the emotional hold she had on him. Nena, he began, his voice steady, I need to talk to you. She was quiet for a moment before replying, Of course, my son. What's on your mind? Chijioke hesitated. This was the moment. I need to set some boundaries, Mom. Ifeoma and I need to build our own life. We can't keep doing things the way you want. We're a family now, and I need to make sure we have space to grow together. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Chijioke felt the air in his lungs grow thick. When Nena finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost hurt. Chijioke, I've always been there for you. I've always made sure you had what you needed. Is this how you repay me? By pushing me away? Her words hit like a punch to the gut. He could hear the sorrow in her voice. But beneath it, he knew there was manipulation. She was playing the victim, trying to make him feel guilty for wanting independence. But Chijioke held firm. I'm not pushing you away, Mom, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. But I can't keep living in your shadow. I need to make my own decisions now. Ifeoma and I need to figure things out on our own. There was silence on the other end of the line. For the first time, Chijioke felt as though he was finally taking control of his own life. Later that day, when he sat down with Ifeoma, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. He knew it wasn't over, that there would still be challenges ahead. But he had made the first step toward freedom. I spoke to her, Chijioke said quietly, his eyes meeting Ifeoma's. I set boundaries. It's going to take time, but I'm done letting her control everything. Ifeoma's eyes softened, but there was a hint of cautious optimism. Thank you, Chijioke. I know it's hard, but I need you to be on my side. We need to build our own life, together. Nena's reaction to Chijioke's newfound boundaries was nothing short of expected. She didn't take the news well. In fact, she took it as a personal affront. The grip she had so carefully cultivated on her son's life had started to slip, and she wasn't going to let it go without a fight. She began to subtly undermine their efforts. She invited Chijioke over for family meals, always under the guise of needing him for something important. I need you to help me with something around the house, she'd say. Her voice laced with urgency. Your father isn't around to help me, and you're the only one who can do it. She was always so careful in her approach, never outright demanding, but the expectation was clear. Chijioke would drop whatever he was doing, running to her side without a second thought. Ifeoma was left behind, feeling like an outsider in her own marriage. As the weeks passed, Chijioke began to see the pattern. Every time he tried to set boundaries with his mother, she would respond with guilt and manipulation. You're so busy with Ifeoma now. Do you even remember your mother anymore? She'd say, feigning hurt. Chijioke started to feel the strain between his mother and his wife, the tug of war pulling at his heartstrings. It was exhausting. But he had made a promise to Ifeoma, and he was determined to honor it. The power struggle between Nena, Ifeoma, and Chijioke had reached its peak. Each day was a battle of wills, a dance of subtle manipulations and quiet resistances. And though Nena still held significant sway in Chijioke's life, the seed of independence had been planted. The emotional tug-of-war that had been brewing for months finally reached its boiling point. Ifeoma could no longer pretend that everything was okay. Nena's constant interference was suffocating, and her subtle jabs at Ifeoma's capabilities as a wife and woman were growing sharper with each passing day. It wasn't just about wedding plans anymore. It was about control, Nena's need to maintain her grip over Chijioke, over their lives and over their marriage. It wasn't until the family dinner one evening that everything finally exploded. It had started as a regular Sunday gathering, but Nena's presence was anything but normal. She had once again insisted on handling the dinner arrangements, knowing full well that Ifeoma preferred to cook. The moment they arrived, Nena had made a show of how much help Chijioke was to her, as though Ifeoma had no say in any of the household matters. "Chijioke, you've always been the man of the house. Your father would be so proud of you," Nena said loudly as they sat down to dinner, her eyes carefully watching Ifeoma's reaction. Ifeoma, already feeling cornered, tried to smile politely, but the sarcasm in Nena's tone was unmistakable. Chijioke, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, nodded and smiled at his mother. "Thanks, Mom. You know I've always tried to live up to what you taught me." Nena turned to Ifeoma with a bright, almost too perfect smile. "Ifeoma, dear, don't you think Chijioke is such a good son? He's always been so dutiful, so responsible." Ifeoma could feel the weight of Nena's words, even though they were wrapped in compliments. It was always the same, subtle barbs wrapped in layers of praise, undermining her without ever saying anything directly. "Of course he is," Ifeoma replied, her voice tight. "Chijioke is a wonderful person." Nena's smile didn't falter. "Well, you know, dear, it's not just about being a good person, is it? It's about knowing how to handle your household. A woman's role is so important in keeping things in order. You'll learn with time, I'm sure." The words were like daggers. Ifeoma's eyes flashed with anger, but she held herself back. This time, she would not let Nena get away with it. She had been patient, but her patience was running thin. She needed to say something, and she needed to say it now. "I've been learning, Nena," Ifeoma said, her voice cool but firm. "And I've been doing just fine. But this constant interference, it's too much. I can't keep pretending like it's okay." Nena's eyes narrowed slightly, and Chijioke's head snapped up in surprise. He hadn't expected this. "What do you mean by interference?" Nena asked, her tone smooth but laced with tension. "I mean the constant reminders that I'm not good enough, that I don't measure up," Ifeoma said, standing up from the table. "I've been trying to make this work, Nena, but every time I turn around, you're there pulling the strings, making decisions for us." Chijioke stood frozen, caught between the two most important women in his life. He had never seen his wife so angry, so desperate. And for the first time, he realized how much pain she had been carrying, how much she had been holding in. Nena's face turned cold, her smile replaced by a hard, calculating look. "You think you can just come into my son's life and push me out? You'll never win, Ifeoma. I'll always be here. Always." Ifeoma's voice was trembling with emotion, but there was strength behind it. "I'm not trying to win, Nena. I'm trying to keep my marriage intact. I'm trying to protect my husband from your suffocating control." Chijioke's mind was spinning. He had heard the words, but he hadn't truly heard them until now. He had always been so wrapped up in his mother's love, her devotion, that he hadn't seen how toxic it had become. He hadn't seen how much it was driving a wedge between him and the woman he loved. He turned to Ifeoma, his eyes full of regret. "I didn't know. I didn't realize how much this was hurting you." Ifeoma nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I've tried to be patient. I've tried to fit into your world, but I can't anymore. I need you to choose, Chijioke. I need you to choose me." Chijioke spent the next few days in turmoil. The fight had shaken him to his core. He had never questioned his relationship with his mother before. She had always been there, a constant in his life. But now, for the first time, he saw the damage her presence had done to his marriage. He saw how much he had taken Ifeoma for granted, how much he had allowed Nena to control their lives. He knew what he had to do, but it wasn't going to be easy. Rebuilding his marriage meant confronting his own mother, the woman he had always put on a pedestal. It meant breaking free from the ties that had bound him to her, and that was the hardest part. The confrontation with Nena came a few days later. Chijioke walked into his mother's house, his heart pounding. Nena was in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Chijioke, you're here," she said, as if nothing had happened. He stood still, taking a deep breath. "We need to talk." Nena's smile faltered, and she put down the knife. "About what, my son?" Chijioke swallowed hard. "About Ifeoma, about us. I can't keep letting you control everything. I can't keep pretending that what you're doing is okay. I love you, Mom, but I need to live my life. I need to make my own decisions. Nena's expression darkened, but she remained silent. Chijioke pushed forward. I've been so blind. I've let you manipulate me. I've let you drive a wedge between me and Ifeoma. But I can't do it anymore. I'm choosing my wife, Mom. I'm choosing my family. Nena's eyes filled with tears, but this time Chijioke didn't flinch. He didn't let her guilt him. I'll always love you, Mom. But I need you to understand, my loyalty is with Ifeoma now. It's time to let go. The weeks that followed were difficult, but they were also transformative. Chijioke and Ifeoma worked to rebuild their relationship, setting boundaries with Nena and learning to communicate more openly. It wasn't perfect, but they were finally working together as partners, as equals. Nena, though hurt, began to accept that her control over her son was slipping. She didn't give up entirely, she never would. But slowly she learned to respect the space that Ifeoma and Chijioke had carved out for themselves. In the end, Chijioke learned a powerful lesson. Love cannot be manipulated, nor can it be controlled by guilt. It must be nurtured, protected, and given the space to grow. And for the first time in his life, he realized that the most important thing was not his mother's approval, but the love and trust he had with his wife.